Welcome to this week's episode of The Grapevine, brought to you by Herdify.com. This week we've got a guest I think you're going to love. He certainly knows about how to scale D2C brands, and that's the founder of the Turmeric Co. Going to hold one up as a big fan and drinker myself, and that's Thomas Hal Robson-Kanu, ex-professional footballer and, as I say, founder of the Turmeric Co. Thomas, how are you? Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Tom and Ed. Yeah, pleasure to be here and keeping well, thank you.
Good stuff, good stuff. As usual, I'm joined by Ed. Ed, you well?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah, hello everyone, and hi Thomas. It's really good to have you on the podcast.
Great, thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. So, as regular listeners will know, we talk a lot about word of mouth, offline influence, behavioural science, and how this can kind of help us grow our businesses without the typical spray and pray tactics, which are often kind of advised, especially by large ad platforms. And Thomas, I saw you talk in Amsterdam back end of last year, and you started talking about how you'd used community to grow the business. And at that point, I was like, right, we've got to get you on. This guy's going to be a fantastic guest. So I was really excited. Hopefully we can talk about that today. Before we go there, can I just let you introduce yourself, introduce the business, and just give us a bit of background?
No, of course, yeah, it'd be a pleasure. So obviously, being an athlete, played professional football for over 16 years at an elite level, which I'm very, very proud of. But during that period, I suffered really bad injuries and really bad inflammation post-surgery in my knees. And so in order to recover from that, the doctors at the time prescribed anti-inflammatories and painkillers to me, and they took the edge off the pain. They certainly didn't deal with the root cause, and the downside of it was that my body had adverse effects to them. So I started passing blood in my urine, had severe nausea, and this was very early on in my career. So as a sort of young adult, late teenager, it was quite a traumatic experience. And in order to play without pain and restriction, I had to somehow find a way to recover from this, this trauma that I had experienced in my knee naturally. And so it was at that point that my father and we began looking into natural remedies and natural alternatives to the inflammation, the inflammatory products I'd been given and the painkillers that I'd been given. And we began coming across all of these natural raw ingredients, things like pineapple, things like ginger, things like watermelon, things like pomegranate, and then things like turmeric. And each one of these raw ingredients had anti-inflammatory properties, had antioxidant properties, and had also been used in certain parts of the world for over millennia, for a long, long time. And so my father basically began sourcing these raw natural ingredients and turning them into a blend. It was started off as a golden paste, and it turned into a golden elixir, and it was very potent and very strong. And so, being quite fussy as a teenager, I basically said, I couldn't drink that every day. And so after a few iterations, after a number of weeks, my father basically created this golden elixir, which when I had the first time, really knocked my socks off. It was super potent, but it was actually enjoyable to take. It tasted good. And so it was from that point on where I used this golden elixir, this golden blend of all of these raw natural ingredients, including obviously turmeric as the base, over a 6-week period. And after 6 weeks, my usual routine is, sort of get up in the mornings, go into the bathroom, into the shower. And in the shower at that moment in time, I realized that was the first time in over 2.5 years that I had woken up without pain or restriction in my knee. And so it was a light bulb moment for me, because I knew fundamentally it was down to this golden elixir which my father had created, and it was opposite to everything that the doctors, the surgeons, the physios at the club had told me. And so I used it as my secret weapon throughout my career. And within a year, I'd made my first team debut. A year after that, I made my international debut. A year after that, I made my Premier League debut, and subsequently went on to have the career that I had. And it was in 2016 where we basically realized that what we were creating at home was so far superior than what was on shelf in retailers and what was available to consumers who now, given a decade on, were becoming more and more aware around natural nutrition and the impact that it can truly have on health and specific health ailments around pain and inflammation. And so, yeah, we set about on a journey to bring what was a homemade recipe to market, and we achieved that in 2018 with the launch of the Turmeric Co.
Fascinating. And still pain-free today?
Pain-free today. I never felt better. So, but
nice.
It was, we launched in 2018, and obviously I knew it helped me. By that point, a lot of our friends, a lot of our families, a lot of my teammates were using it, and we were seeing the benefit on them as well. So we knew that it was, it wasn't just me who had experienced it. And so from launch to now, we've had over 10,000 customer reviews of the product changing people's lives. And I think that for us and for me and for, the team, that's everything for us. This is very much a passion project. It's about, really fundamentally educating people, but changing people's lives for the better, allowing people to, live a life and have a lifestyle without restriction, without pain, optimize their health, optimize whatever they're doing, and actually live in abundance rather than sort of living in restriction and living in lack.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, I've been super interested in the gut-brain link, right? And mental health, and turmeric and ginger are kind of huge in that as well. So there's so many areas that your product touches. Yeah, it's really cool. So if we jump forward then to that conversation I heard, you talked about, your launch strategy was all about, you've built this great product, you've got friends and family using it, it's helped you perform at kind of the highest levels at elite sport. Then you go to launch a product, you said, sounds like community is the way we're going to launch this. Like, talk me through that, and how did you arrive at that? How did you arrive at that is going to be our strategy?
To be honest, I think it was just, we didn't really see any other means of launching. We weren't going to launch the business and drop a 20 million advertising budget on the launch, and on the brand. It was just like the only way that we could really do it. And obviously, we were self-funded in a sense where we built a bespoke manufacturing facility. We set up the logistics, we set up the brand, all by ourselves. But actually bringing a product to market, you're immediately paying for impressions, you're paying for views, in the standard way of marketing and advertising. So it was like, how can we actually reach our audience and our end consumer in an organic manner, in a manner where actually there's longevity and there's sustainability and it will stick. And so it was around the realization of that, and then executing that. What did that look like? So that looked like initially understanding where the consumer, where our consumer would be. So we basically began doing trade shows and lots of different types of trade show, so from a retail trade show to a sports trade show to a yoga trade show to a gym goers trade show, to begin to get the sentiment of how those types of consumers would react to our product. What questions were they asking? What needs, were they looking for? And how could we service that? And so it was through these trade shows that we basically used as data gathering exercises. And from that, we then basically assessed this data. And it wasn't, in Excel spreadsheets at that time, it was just literally, on a spider diagram, brainstorming, what was the key messages that we picked up on, what highlights, what links, what do we service? And off the back of that, we began to understand why consumers in specific demographics would purchase our product. And then that allowed us to then build messaging around that, which then allowed us to target that demographic or that specific audience in a more effective way. And so we then, off the back of that, also leveraged the experience of the product and the journeys of our initial customers using the product and how that changed their lives. And we used that content to then sort of feed, whether it was our socials or feed our our blogs, our messages, our creative through socials, to then build audiences and build engagement, and off the back of that engagement we sort of just rinsed and repeated. And so that was how we initially launched the business and the brand, and that allowed us to really sort of build a strong core and community around the business.
Cool. And did you leverage any of the communities linked to your professional career? Be that communities where you played, or that type of thing, who already knew you, already probably heard this story? Was that part of it, or did you go totally, we're just going to go and explore everywhere?
Yeah, no, the sports side was, again, organic. It was more we were being approached because X player or X team had seen that I had founded this company. Cool. So it wasn't a case that we were going after these sort of sports or but off the back of that, we obviously won some really great customers and have been supplying into all different sports. I think we estimated the other day over 1,000 athletes use our product on a daily basis. When you sort of begin to break that down, it's pretty crazy. But that's sort of the reach that we've been achieving. And so it's that's fantastic. But it's, how do you reach the athletes' parents? How do you reach the families of the athletes? How do you reach the everyday person? Because that's where ultimately your true customer base will be. That's where the volume and the scale is. And so it was really about understanding the best way to begin to communicate to them and educate them to then come into the business and into the brand. And that was the initial discussion that we had, was around whether it was retail or whether it was online. And we very early on established that we had to build the brand as a digitally native brand. We couldn't be retail first, because what we were offering was more than just a fad product, a product which was just trendy, or so let's take Prime drinks as an example, right? It's like everyone, they're selling Prime drinks at a premium of 1,000%, and it's like, well, even more. And it's like, well, brilliant, but the longevity there, they're not going to build longevity into what they're doing. It's very much it's hype, it's a fad, and those drinks are, it's not like it's a drink which is changing people's lives for the better. It's full of preservatives, full of colorings. It's awful. But that's not the route that we want to go to. But for them, for example, they achieve massive distribution, massive reach. They're into Walmarts, into all different stores. But actually, for us, it was around, how can we change people's lives to the better? How can we educate those people who need the product in their lives? And the way that we did that was through online. So being able to communicate directly to people in their homes through messaging, through creative, and off the back of that, once they purchase, take them through their purchase journey and explain to them, what they're experiencing, why they're experiencing that, how they can leverage and enhance their lives for the better further. So it's more the purpose and the mission of what we're doing is more than just sales of a retail brand. It's about passion to change people's lives to better.
I think something that's really interesting from kind of a behavioural science point of view is that often when you're setting up a brand and you decide to go e-commerce, it's because you want to reach everyone as quickly as possible. Whereas you kind of took a step back from that and still chose to sell into particular communities and find the people that really wanted and needed your product. And like, ultimately, I think that really helps you build a brand, because when people are looking for that social proof in a product, they're looking for people who are like them and that they can relate to, right? So being able to say, like, other people that are doing lots of yoga use this product, so that really helps people relate to the brand and kind of speeds up adoption and increases the amount of influence that they have within those communities.
Yeah, I think kind of adding to that, and really, I guess it loops back to your first comment, Thomas, that you weren't going to spend £20 million launching the brand, right?
Sure.
And I think there's a lot of e-commerce businesses, people like Prime have probably taken loads of investment or however they funded it, but they're going to spend a lot of money on their kind of go-to-market. There's a lot of brands who can't do that, right? It's just that money isn't available to them. And it's fascinating to see that journey that you've taken, as Ed said, using communities to grow that to build a sustainable business. And I think that was the key word I picked up from there, right? You're not just trying to build a fad that spikes, bang, it's how do you build long-term sustainable growth, which I think is fascinating. I guess linked to that, right? I guess probably very easy now looking back to say that worked for you. I guess in the midst of that, it was probably less clear. Maybe I'm wrong, but when did you know that community was working for you, that this community approach was working? Like, did you ever think, sod it, we just need to spend loads on ads? Or I'm just fascinated how it felt in the middle of it.
Yeah, I think it was after the first few testimonials that we did, and we created these testimonial sort of case studies and creatives and filmed with the customers and their journey. And then we basically created a creative off the back of them and then used that within our sort of marketing funnel. So we put that into across social. We put it into our Facebook group club at the time, and the response that they had was just insane, and it spurred on another 20 or 30 video messages from customers, and it was like we didn't even ask for them. It was just they just saw that's how the product was impacting those people's lives, whether it was through arthritis in their fingers, whether it was through fatigue in the mornings, whether it was through quite severe ailments where they were having various medications for treatment, and the product helped sort of cleanse their bodies, and they were living in a completely different body. That was probably the moment where we were like, wow, it is about community. It is about how can we continue to build sort of layer and layer, brick on brick with these people who are having experiences around the product, and and then also champion them as well. And I think that's a big thing that we're continually looking at, is how can we champion the story of our customers, because they're the heroes. They're the ones who have taken a step into the dark in terms of trying a product, looking to change their lifestyle, change their habits for the better, and this is the impact that they've experienced. And so it just makes complete sense for us that was that was the way forward, and that was when we truly realized that the power of that.
How long did that take, do you think?
I'd probably say that point when that happened, we're probably in mid 2019, so 18 months in. So it's not overnight. This is like it's from launching in 2018. It was it was building that, but that was sort of a moment where it was like, okay, wow, that's not normal kind of thing.
I think that's pretty amazing. I mean, nowadays people are trying to come up with all sorts of ways to get that user generated content, and that your product's just generating it just through the power of the product, which I think is pretty cool.
I also think there's a lot of people looking for short-term wins. Everyone the hack culture we live in, it's like we want to build a long-term sustainable business, but help me fix this problem tomorrow. But it's impressive that, I guess maybe I don't know, maybe the fact that as a professional sports person you have to work so hard before you get there. We're used to just working hard for a long time and keeping it going, but either way it's What about the switch then to, because I presume, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I presume you then switched to sort of more traditional acquisition, paying for customers. Did you? Why did you? And do you still, when you do that, do you still think about community in that context as well, or do you view it differently?
Yeah, I think just on your first point around sort of time and longevity, it's like the amount of people who perceive brands when they make it as overnight successes is like scary. And the best example for this, for me, and sort of really opened my eyes in terms of business, was Fever Tree. And obviously, you know, a lot of people know the story of Fever Tree, probably, you know, a little bit more prevalent a few years ago when they sort of really did blow up, blow up. But it was like, at that point when they blew up, I think they reached £1 billion valuation. They were seen as an overnight success, and people in their heads, for whatever reason, thought that they had been around for like 3 or 4 years. And it was like, at that point when they had that valuation, I think they had been around for either a decade or 12 years. I can't remember exactly. But it's like, but they were perceived as an overnight success. And so, you know, for us, what we're doing, you know, I say to the team, I say constantly, you know, this isn't a 6-month project. It's not a year's project. This isn't a 5 years project. This is a generational project. We're in this for the long term. We're talking decades of consistent hard work before we begin to sort of realize the vision that we see. And our vision, you know, is serving 100 million customers globally. Like, that's what we want. We want to change the lives of 100 million people. And so, like, when you say that, people look at you and they're like, they genuinely don't think you're serious. But that's what we're here to do, and that's what we're about. So, yeah, I think just the point that you raised, I thought just worthwhile saying that,
awesome.
and a lot of and it's helpful for a lot of business, you know, owners or entrepreneurs or people working in businesses, because they do think about, you know, short-termism, and it's like, okay, 6 months, where are we going to be in 6 months? Where are we going to be in a year? No, like, where are you going to be in 10 years? Where are you going to be in 20 years? Like, how have you changed the shape of your life and people's lives around you in that time? So then that's our mentality. And yeah, to your point in terms of acquisition, then, yeah, look, every channel is every channel is on a ratio or on a scale of scalability. You know, so it's like, what can you realistically scale, and what do you need to input into that in order to achieve that volume of scale? And so there comes a point where you need to drive more volume into your business, and the best way to do that is firstly from a position of strength, and then also from a position of full transparency in terms of your understanding. You know, so you've got like a 360 degree view of what it is you're about to turn on and the impact that it will have. And what I mean by that is, when it comes to acquisition, the majority of brands, particularly early stage brands, will spend on acquisition without understanding their true customer acquisition costs, so their true CAC, and their true lifetime value on their customers. And again, it's not because they don't want to, it's most part because they haven't got the tools to access that level of information. So the first step for us was beginning to invest in terms of data. So how could we really begin to understand and analyze and become obsessed around data around the customer, i.e., you know, a customer has, you know, average days between order for specific product. You know, who has that? So, like, who even thinks about information? But like, these are the fundamentals that you really need in order to then successfully turn on channels where you're going to invest into and are therefore performance based. And so when you have a level of data around your business, around your product and around your customer, is the time when you can begin to turn on and invest in acquisition. And yeah, it's not only that, but it's also, when I was talking about the 360 view, you can invest in acquisition and you can then have all of the data, but you around the business and the behavior of the customer. But if you don't then have the data on the purchasing side, i.e. reason for purchase, messaging around the purchase, creative, you know, type of creative, you're actually not then going to acquire the customers to the efficiency you need, and then certainly not to the volume. So long story short, it was just around, we did a massive deep dive into what performance marketing looks like, and off the back of that built sort of frameworks and models that we began to run to begin to pull in this data, understand our customer, and off the back of that we then began to test and learn. And that was basically what we've been doing since. So look, like the flip side is there are channels where you can, if a product goes viral on TikTok and you've got the right, mechanisms in for purchase, then you can drive, you can achieve acquisition. But that's one in, a million brands who do that. And it's so, but on the flip side, there are also innovative ways which are always, increasing and always adapting and changing. And I'd say, the one for any brand to look out for at this moment in time is TikTok Shop as a marketplace, and what you can potentially do with that with zero ad spend. These opportunities arise every 3-4 years, and it's about being sort of ahead of the curve to identify it and then participate in that early learnings process. So then once the channel is then optimized, you're then actually optimized as a brand, so you can then scale into that channel. So long-winded answer.
No, it's good. Are you doing much with that at the moment? Are you sort of in the explore stage, or
explore? Yeah, so we're exploring heavily. So we're getting some incredible learnings. But yeah, it's all the biggest thing for brands in this current climate and this day and age is being omni-channel. So you can't be I'm a digitally native vertical brand only. You need to be a digital native vertical brand. You need to have, you need to be serving on Amazon. You need to be into, retail or trying to drive penetration into retail. You need to be looking at out-of-home activities. You need to be looking at sampling. You need to be looking at, partnerships and, cross-collaboration, sampling inserts, gifting, all of these areas where it's like incrementally done across the board. That's how you begin to create sustainable value. And then, as I said, if, for example, one of those channels all of a sudden, and that's the big thing, so all of these channels, they have to feed into a data point, right? So your data processing and interpretation of the data and the performance of each of these channels has to be literally instant, because if you see an opportunity to scale and optimize performance in a particular specific area, you need to drive that and push that and invest into that channel and max that channel out, to really make sure you're driving efficient growth.
And are you guys, I know when you spoke about there last year, you were talking about the move into retail. Is that still something you're looking at, or have you progressed with that? Like, how's that side look?
Yeah, so we're speaking with retailers, and the big thing for me is that our specific category is being underserviced in retail, in that the current options on retail aren't functional shots. They're juices masquerading as shots. And so, we're looking to educate retail and say, look, you guys are losing customers in this category because you're not servicing them with what they need. And what they're looking for is functional beverages which actually have a tangible impact on their health, not just fad type shots which have been highly processed or full of apple juice. And so we're on this, on a big education, drive into retail to begin to open up those doors, because all that's happening with this category in retail is, although it 100% it will be growing because people are more health conscious, the category will be experiencing high rates of churn, that just means that customers will be trying this product and not trying it again because it didn't really do anything for them, and they'll be missing out on opportunities to drive incrementally rates of sale because the customers continually come back. So look, retail for us is a massive priority, and we're working hard to educate retailers and buyers on this. And it's amazing sometimes you look at the buyers and from that perspective, it's really beginning to understand, what do they want? All they want is to see growth in their category, but a lot of them, their category is on their shoulders. So decisions that they make, i.e. listing a new brand, you've got to have some serious steel and some serious, belief in what you're about and knowledge to know that, okay, I'm going to list this brand because it's going to improve the growth of this category. It's going to improve the rate of sale in this category. And so, yeah, it's really fascinating to sort of see that dynamic and begin to, have these discussions because, it's, we were obviously needing pioneers in this space who are aware of the importance of quality, high functional products.
How do you see retail fitting in with your subscription offering? So do you see it as an acquisition tool, so someone goes into the shop, buys it, and then becomes a subscription customer kind of along the line? Or do you see it as a sort of different marketplace? They're people who are more likely to buy in shops, and that's where they'll continue getting your product from?
No, I think that you're always going to experience cross-pollination, and the more distribution channels you have, the better. As long as you can service that demand and you can effectively communicate your message into each of those channels, the more channels, the better. And I think there's the everyone remembers. Is it Harry's? Had the Harry's shavers? Remember the Harry's shavers? Yeah. And obviously they, again, another example of a company blowing up, and they, went mega, went parabolic, and they were all about online. And they still are, as a brand. It's like online, that's their messaging and their positioning.
Yeah.
I think it's the latest stat is 80% of their revenue is through retail. They're in Target, they're in Walmart, they're in, every outlet in the US in the retail chain. But people in the e-commerce space, they get almost fooled into the belief that e-commerce is, true e-commerce. It's been trendy. It's been, it's a nice space to be in. It's full of innovators. Obviously, it's based on tech. So, you get a specific type of individual. But actually, true growth and true distribution is omni-channel and happens not only online where you can scale certain channels, exponentially, but actually distribution. If you win 10,000 outlets in the US and you have a rate of sale of 10 units per SKU and have 10 SKUs in that, you do the math on that. How do you even you're talking tens upon millions on a weekly basis. So look, it is what it is.
Yeah, I think that's a really good observation. We have to remember, even in the UK, and I think it's even more in the US, but it's like 74% of shopping still happens offline. Right, so as you say, some people are diehard, which I love. One of the things I was thinking with the retail, when you're speaking to these buyers, are you using your data to try and convince them that says, look, we know we have a good community here, right? So if you drop it in this area, people are more likely to buy it. If you drop it in these areas, people haven't heard of us, they won't buy it. Are you using your data in that way? You guys seem like really on the cutting edge of using data.
Yeah, look, like we use that data, but that data is kind of irrelevant to a retailer because all they care about is their customer, their shopper. So until you validate that their shopper is your shopper, that's when it gets interesting for them. And so that cross section of saying, okay, well, how can we say, we're running a survey to our customers, say pick 1,000 of our customers and we want to run a survey to them. First question on that survey is, do you shop at this retailer? Now, all of a sudden, when you do that, that's when it gets interesting. And that's when you begin to, create that pull for the retailer or for the buyer, because that's all they care about. They're not really, they don't care about winning more market share. And this is something, again, as a very different from an e-commerce perspective, because e-commerce perspective is all about winning market share, because you have zero market, so you always have to have that mentality of we need to win market share. Retailers, they have market share, so it's how do we serve and drive growth within that market share, within that customer base. And so it's a very, very different mentality and a different approach. So understanding that, and then developing that to your consumer, to your needs, to your brand and products needs in relation to that retailer, is when you can begin to sort of have, at least begin to open up dialogue with them.
Yeah, makes sense. Last area I wanted to talk through, and you sort of briefly opened it already, is the global expansion, right? If you want to serve 100 million people globally, how do you plan your rollout? That how do you pick where to go next? Talk me through that.
Take a guess.
You're just going to go bigger market US.
No. So it's data again. So with data and data. So again, so we know we're on Shopify Plus, right? Great platform. Excellent in terms of sort of analytics and the information that it gives to a merchant. And so we can see who's landing on our site from where. So we know the volume of traffic that we receive from the US, as an example, when we're not even serving them. We can see parts of Europe, what traffic is coming in from where are they landing, what are they, what's their behavior on the site, what are they looking at. So we have a good idea of, and that's at state level as well. We'd be city level in the UK or in Europe, in America, it's at state level. So we have a good idea of sort of where we see volume coming in. So again, I think for us, it's rolling out a internationalization, strategy and plan, and then executing it. Really is pretty much as simple as that. And so it's about getting the product to the customer. We're a chilled product, so it adds a layer of complexity, but it's not impossible. And then it's around, the messaging and the communication into that particular state or particular country or particular city that you're targeting.
Okay, nice. Ed, any more questions from you before we start to bring it to a close?
No, I mean, it's fascinating. It's always refreshing from a data perspective to hear someone who's kind of set out to use data, and also, or that means that they're collecting it at the right level. I think that's what people often sort of where they stumble is they want to add a new channel, but they don't set up the data coming in from that and to connect things up. I mean, retail is a good one there as well, where if you've been online only, you suddenly lose a lot of data about your customers. Once you start putting in Tesco, right? If you're a Tesco sale, you get a lot less data from it. So that kind of connecting that up with surveys and actively going out to find out about those customers, I think is, a really interesting way of doing it.
Awesome. Well, just to start wrapping the conversation up, I think that's been super interesting. I think my three takeaways are communities, data, and patience. You've leveraged communities to kind of get you moving. You've been super focused on your data to give you that advice and that knowledge as you're going through and as you scale. And you were patient. It wasn't about overnight success. It was about grinding and then the long game, which I think is great. There's the product plug very quickly. If you are an e-commerce business, we can help you find your communities. But I think, as you've heard Thomas talk, there are loads of ways you can get started with this. And I think really people should start thinking about, especially as we go into 2023 with, tough economic times, the value that communities can bring to you, the value of having your data in play and patience. So some good things for people to get started with. Thomas, before we close, we do a little segment just as a product recommendation. It's a bit light-hearted. Herdify is all about word of mouth. So we do that as a bit of a fun bit. Now I'm going to go first to let you guys think. I came pre-prepped, and just because it's you and we've got you on the podcast, but also I love the product. All of my advice is to anyone who buys it is make sure you buy enough for your significant other. Because when I bought it for me, My wife started drinking it, so it depleted twice as quickly, which I wasn't expecting. So plan ahead would be my piece. Thomas, what are you enjoying at the moment? What would you be recommending if you were out and about?
I'd be recommending. No, to be honest, it's this is more a sort of lifestyle recommendation. Is just to tap into a doctor called Joe Dispenza. So he's all about originally he's fundamentally around epigenetics, more around the mind body connection and how that can sort of really influence your reality and how you perceive your reality and how that actually impacts the experiences of your life. And so rather than a sort of specific product recommendation, I'd recommend tapping into Dr. Joe Dispenza. He has a number of books which you can purchase as well. I think
any favourite books, like ones for people to get started on?
My favourite book of his is a book called Becoming Supernatural. But he also has books around breaking the habit of being yourself, which is also very powerful. And then another one called You Are the Placebo. But just anyone who's who wants to take their life and their mind to the next level and sort of outside of what we perceive as our current reality. And I would say our current reality is, sort of BBC News on a weekly basis, every day, 10 o'clock BBC News, people watching that are, they call television programs for a reason, because you are being programmed. And so how can you break that and actually unlock your mind and begin to think in different patterns, which will then actually begin to influence your life?
Awesome. That's probably the deepest and best recommendation we've had on the series. So Ed, tough one to follow. Last but not least.
I'm not even going to try and top that for deep and influence, but I was going to recommend. I'm not doing dry January, but for anyone who is, the Bristol Beer Factory Clear Head is awesome. It's the best non-alcoholic ale that I've had. It also is a collaboration with a charity called Talk, which supports mental health as well. So you get to do a little bit of good for that, and you get a really tasty non-alcoholic beer.
Awesome. Some solid set of recommendations, all focused, as we're in January, on making us better people. So Thomas, thanks for joining us. It's been fantastic to kind of hear your personal journey, the business journey, and I think actually there's so much advice if people sit down with a notepad and they can take a lot from what you said. So I appreciate you giving us some time.
No, absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, guys.